I'm going to induce vomiting in you." She found it unbearable to be in the same room as him. Insiders disclosed Elizabeth Montgomery, adored for Enchanted, said to have held strong distaste for a particular co-star years and years afterwards. The startling causes of her finally hostility has surfaced. Today, we reveal the tension and the drama. On site, and the things that really made her head TM in 1964, when Bewitched debuted. Viewers were presented with a couple on television that was unlike any they had before observed. Samantha Stevens, a lovely and clever suburban witch, and Daron Stevens, her mortal spouse, a sensible, well-intentioned advertisement exec, who was portrayed by Elizabeth Dick York and Montgomery. The two provided an enticing combination of comedy and romance to the little screen. Their bond was so sincere, their exchanges are so organic that it became the series' central theme. Beginning with the first episode, Montgomery York then emitted a spark that traveled past the lines of script. Elizabeth Simonthant was a charming character, light-hearted but determined, enchanted but realistic. Daron from York, in the meantime, was the ideal counterpoint, centered, a little agitated, and committed to preserving a feeling off-typical even if he is married to a ladyho, was actually capable of snapping her fingers. And alter this. Together they established equilibrium between the imaginative as well as the routine that made Bewitched as a phenomena in culture. There the cadence of the comedy was perfect. In one, Samantha may make a harmless spell to address a problem at home, and Daron from York would reply with a mixture of disbelief and frustration, his voice swelling in fictitious indignation, prior to vanishing into loving resignation. In another, an affectionate exchange between the two would inform spectators that, underneath, the pair was fully involved in the magical hijinks. In a romantic relationship, this lively, light-hearted taunting with intimate moments was crucial to the popularity of the show. Montgomery in York was skilled at communicating German veracity in even the simplest imaginary situations. Was Samantha attempting to conceal her pose from Daron, or inquisitive neighbors confront her naughty mother? The recurring topic and was always same. The foundation of this marriage was love, respect, and trust. Their credible collaboration that anchored the show's human feeling and magic, enabling audience to engage with them on an individual level. Among the factors that contributed to their what made the on-screen connection so captivating waist-high regard for one another as actors. According to York, Montgomery possessed the face you could gaze upon for ages, and that she made him more aware of his top performances. In turn, Montgomery valued York's Daron's ability to be relatable to charming. She recognized that the main relationship in the show relied on viewers accepting Daron's cruelty was never the source of irritation. Only in the utter ridiculousness of his conditions, the comedic physicality between them was an additional highlight. York had a slapstick present without exaggerating it, frequently with subtle movements, a sigh of pain, a double take, or a slow blink of disbelief to obtain a coup. Montgomery gave a similar response, perk-knowing smiles and sneaky looks that add layers to their conversations. Even in shows with a lot of magical effects, their chemistry was what held audiences' attention. Adhered to the screen, off-screen, York and Montgomery had a cordial professional relationship. Although they weren't close companions in the social scene of Hollywood's circuit, they were considerate of each other's craft and collaborated without a hitch. This expert ease of translation to their performances, providing the appearance of a couple who actually risked spending time together. Their marriage's success on TV was furthermore as a result of Bewitched striven to emphasize their relationship. Episodes frequently focused on Daron's unwavering commitment to leading a normal life and Samantha's efforts to pay desires. Despite the fact that magical shortcuts she was tempted, this dynamic of push and pull reflected trade-offs made in real-life marriages, establishing them as one of the most similar pairs. Even if one of them was a witch by chance, Dick and Elizabeth Montgomery on screen. York was the epitome of what television looked like. Excellence, Daron Stevens and Samantha, the charming sorceress and her adorable mortal spouse whose union merged Zubabon reality and magic. However, behind Bewitched scenes, though the story was much more intricate, though magic persisted, it frequently had to fight against the actual battles with disease, suffering, and the television's physical requirements manufacturing the causes of York's problems. Dated back many years before being Enchanted. During the 1959 filming of Houston, they arrived in Cordera with Rita Worth and Gary Cooper. York was taking part in a scene that involves physical punishment. It needed heavy machinery to be hauled up a steep slope. While doing so, has a serious back injury, ripped injured vertebrae, muscles, and never recovered completely. For the remainder of his arc, endured terrible discomfort throughout his life. By when Bewitched started filming, in 1964, York had mastered the suffering as best he could, frequently depending on prescription medicines to hold on to working. The production of the studio of the timetable was exhausting. Long hours spent staged comedic, physical scenes that required retakes and moving under script. It was exhausting for most actors. It was punishing to York. He occasionally slept through the night in pain, only to go back to work the following day with a grin and an eagerness to give the show that the audience had been waiting for. Affection. Elizabeth Montgomery, always the professional, rapidly learned a booth state of her well known for her commitment to her art and her kindness toward co-workers, she resolutely pushed for modifications to increase York's capacity to handle tasks. If one could set up a setting to lessen she would support physical strain. Later crew members remembered her stepping in order to recommend blocking during rehearsals efficiency that kept York's safe ruminated motion, her behavior weren't ostentatious or theatrical. Montgomery favored a tactful strategy. However, they said a lot about how much she respected him as a person and as a performer. York was in pain, but he was resolved to giving it his all. He hardly ever let exasperation is evident, rather than employing comedy to reduce stress. However, the cost was indisputable. On some days, he hardly able to stand without squirming. The dependency on painkillers increased, marked, not because he was looking forcefully, but since they were the sole anything that enabled him to continue. Eventually, the burden became unbearable. Point in the 5th season of the show, in 1969, while recording an episode Yorkful on the set, it was a horrifying cast and crew had a moment, and it made obvious that his condition could no longer sustain the series' demands. The doctor gave clear instructions. Persisting in such circumstances could result in irreversible impairment or worse. York then made the agonizing choice to leave Bewitched. His exit marked a sea change, 4th performance for 5 seasons. The York and Montgomery's chemistry had been essential to its accomplishment. They had created a convincing marriage that was full of humor, kindness, and cement and frustration that created the enchanted. The idea seems well-founded. Taking York's place to us a difficult undertaking. But the producers finally introduced Dick Sargent to assume Darren's position. Montgomery managed the changeover using a recognizable professionalism. She greeted Sargent and went on displaying the elegance and charm that made Samantha Stevens is adored. However, Thassa, who had collaborated with York, was aware of the absence was felt profoundly. The cadence York revealed, the unwritten timing, the understated appearances. How they could making a straightforward conversation seem sincere. The banter between spouses was something that couldn't be precisely duplicated. Yorkie had positive things to say about Montgomery. In subsequent interviews, remembering her goodwill and the implicit comprehension during their years together, they shared in the program. Despite the slowdown in his career stopped because of his health problems, he never voiced resentment at her, Rather, he gave credit to Montgomery and the crew behind the production for giving him the opportunity to work despite his restrictions. For as long as he did. Do you want to know more about Elizabeth Montgomery's professional path? She was more than simply the captivating visage of Enchanted. She was a vibrant actress whose life and work demonstrated both Hollywood glitz and a profound feeling of goal. According to reports, her dad, Robert Montgomery, was a well-known performer and director who experienced notable success in the heyday of Hollywood. Her Elizabeth Daniel Bryan, the mother, was actress on Broadway. Being raised in such Elizabeth's home was encircled by stage lighting, scripts, and the subtle performance art at a young age. Although her affluent background and she had access to Hollywood's finest in instruction and the impact of art, Elizabeth's ascent to fame wasn't just a question of connectivity. She went to the Girls Westlake School in Los Angeles, and then the United States New York's Academy of Dramatic Arts, where she refined her skills using official instruction. From the beginning, she displayed an innate charm and easy fusion of warmth, style, and her quick-witted humor that made her distinguish herself from other wannabe performers. Generation. Montgomery started off performing on stage, appeared in a number of Broadway productions prior to switching to 1950s and television. Her first television appearance on her part in the Workrabout's Father's anthology series. Montgomery gives her a valuable gift or experience behind the camera and exposure to a nationwide viewership. She displayed amazing adaptability, effortlessly switching between romance, drama, and some humor. However, Elizabeth landed in 1964. Her career would be defined by this role. Samantha Stevens, the lovable Southern witch from the show Bewitched on ABC. The concept of the show, combining the everyday life as a domestic worker with the enchanted chaos of witchcraft, which permitted Montgomery to display a variety of humorous and theatrical abilities. Her distinctive nose, which turned being one of TV's top identifiable motions, as well as her characterization, she harmony between light-hearted mission shows and genuine sincerity. Samantha from Montgomery was more than a fanciful figure from fiction. She turned into an emblem of culture. In an era where women's television roles were frequently limited to conventional preconceptions, Samantha's indolent humor and ingenuity quietly questioned accepted social mores. The 8 seasons of the show were successful. Between 1964 and 1972, earning Elizabeth's 5 nominations for Emmy Awards. Even if Bewitched continues to be popular, Elizabeth was adamant about not buying typecast. Following the conclusion of the episode, she purposefully looked for roles that broke away from the magically humorous side. She delivered strong results in movies on television like A Case of Rape, 1974, where she portrayed a woman looking for a sexual attack, justice, and The Lizzie Borden's Legend, 1975, in which she signed the job of the chilling Notorious alleged killer, both acts that displayed her dramatic spectrum and received praise from critics, demonstrating her ability to handle intricate, difficult content. Montgomery's profiles throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s comprised a range of professions in thrillers and socialite dramas that are sentient. She gained notoriety for selecting initiatives that targeted significant socioeconomic challenges, frequently sourcing resilient, strong women overcoming hardship. Her commitment to she was mirrored in meaningful storytelling. Own convictions and principles off-screen. Elizabeth was just as she had a strong enthusiasm for support a variety of issues, especially the rights of women. She backed groups that promoted race rights, gender equality, and defense for domestic abuse victims' aggression. Her involvement in activism included extensive humanitarian initiatives, such as collaborate with foundations for AIDS research and philanthropic endeavors for the destitute. In contrast to many other superstars of her day, Montgomery didn't hesitate to leverage her notoriety to highlight contentious and critical concerns, even if it meant questioning the Hollywood status quo. Regarding Dick York, Richard Allen, he was born in Fort Worth on September 4, 1928, Chicago, raised from Wayne, Indiana. Since childhood, York's cozy, kind demeanor and innate his ability to tell stories distinguished him. He started finding employment while performing as a teenager regarding radio dramas in the heyday of radio. His silky voice, sentimentalism, versatility and grounded charm make him preferred by producers. York was in his late teens and had already astonished by a remarkable array of credits on nationwide radio shows. York's soon aspirations shifted to the stage, where he demonstrated his talent and versatile performer. He was on Broadway productions like Sympathy and Tea and Bus Stop, gaining his admiration peers for his proficiency in both men and characteristics who are delicate and susceptible with silent power. His initial phases art showed what would become his characteristic, a relatable, grounded presence that attracted viewers and made them as if they were acquainted with him personally. Eventually, Hollywood called and York made the switch to film. During the 1950s, he starred in well-known films such as My Sister and Inherit the Wind, 1960, Eileen, 1955. However, his most of the film's catastrophic part was in 1959. They arrived at Gary Cooper Weston. Cordura. During the physically taxing filming situation where substantial lifting was required equipment, York experienced a catastrophic axe injury. The agony was acute and harsh, but he kept on working, not knowing that this time would irreversibly change the trajectory of his profession. The harm led to long-term crippling discomfort that would afflict York throughout the remainder of his days. Physicians pressed potent analgesics and even while they permitted him to retain working, they arrived with a unique set of difficulties. York, meanwhile, would not allow the he is defined by his injuries. He persisted in his acting, committed to making each character come to life. He stepped up. York was awarded the function that would establish him as a household name of the mortal husband. Darren Stevenstow, The Enchanted Bewitched, Samantha York's. The depiction of Darren made a deal harmony between frustration and love. He responded week after week with sympathetic annoyance and affection. Tough turmoil of being married to a witch, establishing the show's fantasy compense of human emotion. His chemistry with Montgomery was genuine and charming, contributing to the series among the most popular shows in the 1960s. However, behind the scenes, York's back pain was a never-ending struggle. Shooting Bewitched frequently needed a lot of time on set, and some instances of physical humor left him in pain. As the season's change developed, the impact on his health grew to large. In the 5th season of 1969, York passed out during the shoot and was brought to the medical facility. It was made by doctors, evident that carrying on under such conditions may pose a threat to life. York reluctantly departed. Dick Sargent, an actor was enchanted, brought in as Darren to take his place, leaving. The series was a pivotal moment in York's professional life. The combination of his wounds and the consequences of chronic use of painkillers meant that it was difficult to find steady acting job. He appeared as a guest on a few television in the 70s, but ultimately stopped performing altogether. Instead of becoming resentful, York centered on his family, his health, and subsequent humanitarian initiatives. In the 1980s, York spent a lot of time establishing a charity and aiding the destitute. Acting for Life, which sought to increase awareness and financial support for individuals in a city. Despite juggling his own health issues, he was committed to change people's life for the better of other people. People who were acquainted with him during these years brought to mind his persistent generosity, modesty, and York's by the late 1980s his condition had gotten worse, and he was given an emphysema diagnosis as a result of years of heavy smoking. Restricted to bed for a large portion of his last years, he continued to communicate with friends and admirers, frequently using kind words in his time spent on Bewitched, and expressing appreciation for the affection hecked on receiving. On the 20th of February 1992, Dick York passed away in Grand Rapids at the age of 63, Michigan. His passing signaled the conclusion of a despite being cut short. The career had left a memorable television imprint and past. York's interpretation of Darren Stevens continues to be a prime illustration of the typical husband in sitcoms. Sincerely, affectionate, a little agitated, but relatable at all times. Over the decades that have, York has been remembered after his death, in addition to his skill, but also for his humanity. Former co-workers frequently discussed his on location, his laid-back humor, as well as his capacity to relate to everyone, including staff members and co-stars. He was the type of actor that viewers wanted to see, who they considered to be a friend, someone they could picture residing next door. How do you feel about the partnership between Dick and Elizabeth Montgomery York? Please share your thoughts in the section underneath. We're hoping you've located this useful video. Please remember to like, share, and if you enjoy it, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you seeing, and I'll see you soon in the upcoming videos. Farewell.